to the STEM Peer Mentor podcast. My name is Nawal Abdulhalim, and I am a peer mentor in the Health, Science, and STEM Academy. Today, I am joined by women in science and technology fields, and we are going to be talking about the advantages of STEM careers. So we're going to go in order and introduce ourselves. Heather, if you could introduce yourself first, please.
Thank you, Nawal. Very nice to meet you. My name is Heather Willingham. I am BSN RN. My full-time job is actually as an ICU nurse in a small community hospital in Clayton, North Carolina. And then my part-time job is actually I do work with Nawal's mom at a skilled nursing facility, Capital Nursing and Rehab. My job in that facility actually is not a clinical role, but it's actually an education role. I'm the staff development coordinator. A lot of my duties include onboarding new staff, teaching BLS, teaching lift training and certain skills. And of course, if they ask me, hey, Heather, can you go down there and start an IV? I do that too.
Hi, my name is Gail Larkin. I am a paramedic, and I'm also an assistant professor in the Allied Health Department at Kingsborough Community College. I teach part of the lecture, and this year I'll also be picking up a position as a clinical professor. So I'll be going to the emergency department with my students as well. And I spent many, many years as a New York City paramedic, and now most of the time I'm teaching. So when I started back in the mid-70s, 1970s, it was mostly a male-dominated field. And I'm happy to say that it is nearly, I wouldn't say quite 50-50, but there's certainly more women in this field than ever before. And I'm very happy to be here. Nice to see everyone. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Azure Faucette. I am a professor at Kingsborough in the Biological Science Department. My background for undergrad and for my master's is in animal science, focus on, for my master's, animal nutrition, with at one point in my life, hopes to become a veterinarian. That changed because I enjoyed research. And so I did a PhD at Texas A&M University, where I studied male reproduction, specifically RNA transcripts in sperm. And I did my postdoc at Wayne State at the Perinatology Research Branch of the NIH. And I looked at preterm labor. But right now, I spend my time with my students teaching anatomy and physiology.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Jodi Delsol. I'm currently a STEM academic advisor at Kingsborough in the Health Sciences STEM Academy. And I'm also an adjunct lecturer in the Physical Science Department. My background for undergrad is chemistry, and also for graduates, it was chemistry. And I just completed my doctorate in higher education and administration. My research was to improve the retention of underrepresented STEM students at Kingsborough. And also I work with the Girls Who Code Club at Kingsborough and other programs to help more minority students, underrepresented, to come into the field.
Hello, I'm Christina Colon. I am a faculty in the Department of Biological Sciences. I have a PhD in ecology from Fordham University, and I did my doctoral research in part supported by the Bronx Zoo because I went to the jungles of Borneo to learn about an animal that nobody knew anything about. It's an animal called the civet. I have a master's degree from NYU in environmental conservation education, so I really come at teaching from an informal science and from a hands-on conservation-oriented perspective. Right now, I study the American horseshoe crab, which comes ashore every spring, even up on Kingsborough's beach. And I take my students out to Plum Beach, and we tag and measure and survey the crabs. They're a super important organism, but what they really do is they give my students a hands-on opportunity to do frontline conservation, global level research. And that really, I think excites them, and it excites me because we're all working together to save and solve some big problems. So I really enjoy bringing my research into the classroom and bringing my students into my research.
Thank you. Thank you all for introducing yourselves. These are just some questions for everyone across the board. What is so appealing about your field?
Well, I can answer to start. I think for me, nursing is so varied. You know, you can go into any area of nursing and you're going to find something interesting. As an ICU nurse, the last 2.5 years have not been a lot of fun. It's been a very trying time in healthcare. But if you're someone who, if you enjoy healthcare, if you enjoy caring for people, you know, and I've told a couple of the students that I precepted, some of our newer nurses, you know, if you're in it now, you have to love it, because it's not, honestly, for the faint of heart. It's not for you. You have to, you know, unfortunately develop a thick skin, but it doesn't mean you're not emotional also, because you can't help but be. And you all, obviously, if you're in New York and you all were in the throes of COVID, just as the rest of the world was, I love it because it gives me an enormous sense of purpose. It gives me an enormous, you know, every patient is a puzzle. And I think that's the best, that's one of the things I often say to some of my students that I precept, because when you walk into that room, you have to put together the pieces of the puzzle. You have to find those missing pieces of the puzzle. And sometimes you don't either finish the puzzle or the puzzle kind of eludes you, but you continue to try. So I think that's absolutely the thing I enjoy most about my job.
I'd like to add something about the EMS profession. I'm a paramedic right now. You know, my students are already emergency medical technicians, which is the entry level for pre-hospital emergency care. And they come to Kingsborough to complete the second part of that, which is the paramedic part. What's really challenging about this job, and also very exciting, is that every single call is different. And it's physically, emotionally, and mentally challenging, which is a constant, it's a constant adrenaline rush, but it can also be, you know, it can also be devastating, you know, also going through something like the the pandemic. I think for men and women in this field, it's knowing that you're making a difference in someone's life. You're going out there, you've got to be in shape. You have to be ready to, you know, maybe run up 10 flights on a moment's notice and care for someone. In some instances, you've got to make very quick judgments, very quick decisions, and get them the right medication. We basically bring the emergency department to the patient. So we have everything from cardiac monitors to intubation equipment. Also, it's about 40 plus different types of medication and so on. So we never really know what we're going to find when we get there, even though the dispatchers do their best to get us the information. A lot of times it's not an emergency, but you know, as soon as you start to get complacent, that's when you really get surprised and you're hit with some really challenging calls. So I think the draw for this is really for someone who can act on a moment's notice based on a really rigorous background in training, but also keep that compassionate edge. You know, you have to be nurturing, but at the same time, you have to, I wouldn't really say a very thick skin, but you have to find a way to be able to go to the edge with empathy and compassion without getting too involved where it affects you emotionally. And, you know, some of our paramedics have had some really devastating experiences, and we do have resources now in place that we didn't have decades ago. So that's another really good development in this field, because it can be overwhelming with some of the calls you can see in just a few hours. You may see more than most people see in their lifetime. And you've got to be ready once you drop that patient off at the hospital, regardless of how it's affected you personally or emotionally or physically. You've got to be ready to turn it around, have a clean ambulance, have your equipment ready, and go and give 100% to the next patient. So I enjoy the challenge, and I love seeing my students develop over the year from, you know, scared EMTs to competent paramedics. It takes a long time to get to that point, but it's so rewarding to see that. You know, especially some of the young women who come in who have, you know, I don't know how to do math. I'm afraid of math. And there's a lot of medical math in it. It's basically pretty simple. And of course, we have our male students too. But, you know, because this is about women in STEM, I think, although we've come to the point where we believe in our students, every single new class, there's a challenge to bring our students to the point of self-confidence and put aside those old stereotypes of, well, I'm a girl, I'm not really good at math, or I'm not really good at this, or I don't know if I can lift the patient. So there's a lot of misconceptions that we help our students, all our students, but in this case, we're talking about our female students, help them overcome to succeed in the street.
Thank you.
Well, maybe I'll just jump in and say that there's not a lot of crisis intervention in ecology, which is one of the things perhaps that I like about it more and more. Being a field ecologist is something that is such a passion for me. Anytime I'm outdoors, I'm learning and having a passion for exploring the world and understanding nature and observing things. Today I was out and saw a flock of parrots flying and squawking, and that's exciting to me. And I can really, I don't disengage my personal life necessarily from my professional life, because I enjoy my job so much that I literally do it on vacation. And that's a big plus. And teaching as well. Like, I love teaching. I, will speak to my students any time of day or night to help them out, because I get tremendous personal satisfaction out of assisting them, and also about inspiring the passion I have and the joy of not just understanding nature and unraveling the mysteries of nature, but also making contributions towards protecting nature and the diversity around us. And my students really enjoy learning in a way that is a little bit less structured. Yes, we do math, but we're out counting trees. We're out counting birds. We're out counting how many times the sharks swam around the tank. And we're measuring horseshoe crabs at the beach. So the math becomes fun because the work itself is so rewarding and fun. And perhaps, I didn't fully appreciate how low stress my job is compared to some other jobs. So it's really something. I'm not supposed to say this, but I would do my job for free. So I'll stop talking, because then I'll give away the gig.
Thank you.
I'll just reflecting on what the ladies mentioned. Like, as an advisor, I could always bring my expertise as having a chemistry background and my experience as doing undergraduate research to my students. So when students come into my office and they're unsure of what career path they would like to have, I'm able to discuss different career options for them and help them explore different avenues they may not think of. So I always tell them I have a chemistry background, and right now I'm an advisor and I'm also teaching. So there's other paths you can do with a science background. A lot of students, they're just really fixated on medical school or, engineering, but there's other, avenues that you can take as a STEM major, and a lot of students need to be aware of that. I noticed that all of us brought us back to math in everyone's talks, and math is always the key killer that gets students when they're trying to pass that course. So I always tell them, I have my students who are engineering or physics, and I said, yes, you're in this physics class, but it's all calculus. So if you can't master the calculus, you're going to struggle with, differentiation. So I always tell students that you have to know the math to understand the science. So it's just, a balancing act for the students.
So I guess I'll just talk about animal science and what it's done for me. Clearly, I'm not in animal science as of this moment. So I have worked with mice as a model for humans. I've worked with goats. And so that just shows the variety of research that I've been involved with before coming to Kingsborough. But animal science, everybody think of farmers. And me being a person from Brooklyn and growing up in Brooklyn and being raised in Brooklyn, and then going to school in the middle of nowhere, Alabama, to study agriculture, essentially, it's like, well, what do you want to be, a farmer? And animal science is a little bit more than that. It actually covers not only food industry, and when I say food industry, it's not only on farms. I have friends that work with shelf life of eggs, looked at variety of like meat quality, and even on the aspect of ag engineering about how to manage waste at farms. And I know at one point I was thinking about conservation when I was an undergrad, and which got me into reproduction. And there's so many animals that I would like to see later on down the line. I want my children to see, I want my nieces and nephews to see, and they're becoming extinct. So how can I stop that? Or how can I at least preserve them? And I've taken animal science class that was about conservation and ecology. I've learned a lot, and you can work anywhere from the USDA, FDA, you can work at the NIH, you can do, again, human studies, animal studies. It just takes you further than just farming. And just talk about reproduction. A lot of the information we know about IVF and fertility treatment all start with the researchers that work on cattle. Like at Texas A&M, I was fortunate enough to have lectures from Professor Baser, who found like the maternal recognition of sheep and his cohorts, and then the people who first cloned the cat. So you learn so much, and you think about different ways of how you can apply that to not only humans, but as far as on a conservation ecology level, like wild cats and different endangered species. You know, when you think about science, me, you know, as a woman, I think though most of the professors that I have were males, all the people in my graduate program under reproduction were female. I think we have one or two males in there, but it was just great seeing women move in that area of reproduction. And even when I did a short course, there was a lot of women. I think there was less than half of the people in my group were males, and they're all doing things in reproduction. That's just marvelous. I think my take home is whatever you go into, whether it's nursing, paramedics, ecology, or even chemistry, you can take what you learned and do something else, or go above and apply to something else to help society.
Thank you, guys. What advice would you give to women interested in your field?
Don't let it intimidate you. And this goes back to the whole math thing, or just how complicated science is as a whole, especially something like anatomy and physiology. At first, it seems like a lot of information, or it just seems like you just can't get it. But you'll be surprised that if you reach out to people, you'll get resources to help you to at least accomplish that task. So don't get intimidated by the science. Don't get intimidated by the math. If it's something you are interested in or passionate about, jump into it and just let it happen. And there's going to be crying. There's going to be cursing and hitting yourself in the head. Why am I doing this? But at the end of the day, it's all worth it. It will come around and you'll feel so much better about what you did.
I'll just pick up on what Azure was saying, because when you find something that you truly enjoy, when you have the passion, and I heard this about the people in the paramedic field, those opportunities to do something you love will shrink the mountain down to a molehill. The math is no longer intimidating when the end game is so rewarding and the opportunities that it represents. I took physics and I just wasn't getting it. And we had to do a project, and I said, can I do the physics of bird flight? And my teacher said, sure. I was in high school. And I did so well on that project because I was so excited about learning how these animals get up off the ground. And so really not just stick it out, but really keep an eye on that end game and let that guide you, because once you find your passion, you will never work a day in your life. My husband tells me, like, you say you never work, but yet you're always working. And I have to stop and realize that, again, I do it because I enjoy it, but it doesn't feel like work. And even the hard stuff, it doesn't feel like work because it is so rewarding. So stick it out, find your passion, and you can't go wrong.
I have to agree with Christina. You know, working on the ambulance for so many years, I think being able to bring comfort and really even being able to save someone's life, you know, bringing all your medication and equipment out to the street and walking into a stranger's home or a situation that might otherwise intimidate you, after you've learned how to approach every single scene, no matter what's going on, you go in, you take control, you make order out of chaos. And it's not only very empowering, but it's also very rewarding. I remember too, just loving, oh good, I get to go to work today. That's a pretty awesome feeling. And I think for women, find a role model, find someone that you can look up to and say, wow, look how well they're doing. And, I'll always admit to my students how poorly I did in math initially in high school. And they're like, really? And, because I think it's important for them to see that even their instructors have overcome some barriers. And they like to hear my stories about being one of the early female paramedics on the street. And, I had to convince a lot of people before they would let me treat them. No, I am not a nurse. I'm a paramedic. It was, many decades ago. So it was kind of funny that, they said, well, your partner's the paramedic, right? You're the nurse, right? Or them, giggling, patients laughing when I would get into the driver's seat, like they're going to let the girl drive. So there's a lot of things we've overcome, but it's still, I think, getting a role model and having that, finding that warrior inside that you can go out into a very chaotic and otherwise terrifying situation and walk in and take charge, and again, bring order to chaos. It's empowering, it's rewarding. When you walk into something where it's a life or death situation and you can help somebody, and it's just you and your partner out there. It's not like you have a lot of, your whole hospital staff to back you up. You're going out there with your very limited equipment and stepping into some scary situations. So I think, especially for women, once they realize how effective they are in this field because of our nature to be more, and I dare to say this, but I think women more often than not are the nurturers. And once we get the hang of combining nurturing with that warrior spirit and bringing it together, women in emergency medicine, pre-hospital emergency medicine are unstoppable. I think, we have flight medics, we have paramedics and a lot of different roles. It's not just, working on the streets of New York City. There's other opportunities as well.
I'm in total agreement with what everyone has said in terms of advice, especially as Gail mentioned, and, finding that warrior spirit inside of you. And I remember the first time I had a patient code, and, as a newer nurse, I know I froze. But then I realized, okay, I'm the nurse and I have to jump in. And so the part about having that nurturing spirit, I think, is important as a woman, because when I do go into codes now, I think one thing about women, we can be level-headed, and we can combine that level-headedness, that nurturer, that science, and bring it all together. Just recently, we had a code, and those of us who were as a part of it, we got commended because they said, I've never seen such a, everybody knew their role and everybody was working together. And I said, but that's what we're supposed to do. And that's how, and so once you're going to have those extremely scary moments, and you're going to have those times when you are just not sure of yourself. But once you've done it, and once you've accomplished that, okay, now I can go to the next one. Okay, let me get through the next one. And before you know it, you're that one. My sister said, I don't know how you're able to go in there and push those meds and run those codes and know what. I said, it's just what you do. And if you love it that much, that's what you do. You're going to continue to do it, and it's going to be that thing that, drives you every day. Just like Christina said, it doesn't feel like work. It's what you do. And you're going to, even when you have those emotional, long, just stressful days, you're still going to want to go back the next day.
I'll agree with everything that the ladies mentioned. Just thinking about the advice is just keep on pushing and don't let anything hold you back. I have a lot of female students, especially in the harder sciences, engineering and physics, and sometimes they're the only females in the course, and they're very intimidated by that. And I just tell them, just keep on, focusing and doing well in your classes and studying. And a lot of them are actually the top students in the class. And some of the male students are like, they're kind of upset that, the female students are doing better than them. And I'm like, why? We're all equal, So I always tell the students, keep on pushing. And now a lot of my students are, they're engineers, they're physicists, they've gone to get their doctorate, and then they'll reach back out to me like, remember when you were telling me to keep on pushing and focusing, and then look where I am now. And so that gratification really keeps me, inspiring me to work with my students daily.
I feel the need to just add one thing very quickly. I just need to always remind students that failure is acceptable. You can fail a class. You can drop out. You can come back to this. The pushing and the succeeding is not a linear process, and especially not for many of us who are pulling and pushed in many directions. So when we say don't give up, it's not an end game. If you fail that test, I failed the first test in zoology. Okay, there, I said it, I got a 42. And you know what? Then I learned how to study. And that was the best lesson I ever learned. So allow yourself the latitude to not always be the warrior, because that's an impossible standard. And the only other thing I'll mention is find many mentors. Some of us have this idea we have to have one mentor. You can have lots of mentors. Collect the whole set. The more, the better, because that creates that energy and that opportunity and the problem-solving skills and the networking that you need. It takes a village. So those are my 2 cents.
Thank you, ladies. Why should more women join your field?
Well, in general, STEM careers, I think women, because of, things that you all have said, there should be no limitations on us as women. There should be no limitations on us because of our color, because of our gender, because of our background, because of our nationality. There should be no limits on anyone from that perspective. So if it's something you're passionate about, if it's something that you enjoy, I think it's amazing that, to see the women on this panel and the fields that they're in, and how, someone might say, well, why would a woman want to do that? Because why not? Why shouldn't we do those things? I think, for any woman or, anybody who is interested in, a particular field, and especially in STEM careers, it should be, if this is what you're passionate about, it doesn't matter what anyone says. Oh, well, that's not usually what women do, or, maybe you should think of something else, or maybe you should go, and even as a nurse, of course, it's a particularly female-dominated career path. However, there are so many avenues you can go into with nursing. It's not just bedside. There's education, there's informatics, there's research. There's so much you can do. So I think that that's the important part of that, is you shouldn't allow anyone's limitations. And I mean society's, and I mean our own. We sometimes have these preconceived notions that, because of, oh, well, my background doesn't, it's not going to allow me to do X, Y, or Z. Why should that be? It doesn't matter where you're from, what you look like, what grades you got in math or science. You can go forward, and you will surprise yourself, I think. Wow, I do understand this, and I do get this. And just like Dr. Colon said, nursing school questions and nursing school exams, I had never experienced anything like that. I was the student in high school who didn't have to study, and I could just go in and I could just take a test. I learned some valuable lessons. I have actually 2 bachelor's degrees. My first was in biology, and I got there, and it took me a few semesters to learn how to study. And it took me a while to get, and once I did, I said, okay, this is what I have to apply whenever I go into another, career path. And so then when I went into nursing, totally different once again, but you learn, you allow yourself that grace to fail, because you will, but that doesn't mean, just like she said, it doesn't mean you can't come back. It doesn't mean you can't try again. I have friends who literally got to the last semester, the last exam, and they failed. But what did they do? They came back. And they're some of the best nurses I know now. So I think that's we as women and we as mentors and we as role models. I think it's important to tell the truths about ourselves and about others. The fact that you can fail, you can come back, you can do this no matter how hard anyone says, oh, that's not for you. Yes, it is. If that's what you want, that's what you do.
I would like to say that not only going into the STEMs field, just even if you're not in a STEMs field, that you should always have a knowledge of science, because understanding science gives you an understanding of, I think, the world around you, not only from a physiological standpoint, but also just nature and how things work. Recently, my high school principal, the library in my high school downtown Brooklyn, was named after him. And he spoke to some of the newer students that are there. I say newer because I graduated so many years ago. But he said that no matter what you go into, the reason why he started the school is called Science Skills Center High School. It's because whatever you go into, you need that skill of science in order to become marketable. If you're a journalist, you might not be able to get a job, because how many journalists do you know? A lot. If you are a journalist and you have a minor in, let's say, biology or chemistry, maybe you could work for the journals, looking over papers, helping, or you could work for someplace like Pfizer, just looking over protocols and writing them so that they are legible for scientists and non-scientists. Things like that. You can go in, if you're a political science major, you can minor in biology, chemistry, engineering, and then you can get a job in the government overseeing those things. So science, just don't bubble it into just STEMs. Let it be something that can be studied across all disciplines, because that actually gives us knowledge that we can make informed decisions about ourselves and just the world around us.
I'll just add, in terms of women in science, or perhaps in ecology in particular, I think it's important for us to eliminate the male-dominated demographic in science and thereby eliminate the male-dominated perspective in science. And I can cite many examples of female researchers who approached scenarios with a different view. And I hate to say it, but there is a tendency in ecology or nature studies to look at things from a conflict-based perspective. So the idea that gorillas are these horrifying creatures that run around and tear people limb from limb long existed until a woman, Jane Goodall went to study the chimps, or Diane Fossey went to go study the mountain gorillas, or Baruti Galdikis went out to go study the orangutans. And guess what? They are quite gentle animals that are just grooming and sharing and collaborating and working together. So getting past that initial male-dominated perspective and seeing I want to say see the forest for the trees, because I'm also thinking of a female scientist who went into the study of production forests in Canada and turned the industry on its head, because she realized that the trees were not competing with each other. So these two species of trees that the loggers wanted to cut the other tree because it was competing, none of that made any sense to her. And she realized that they were actually collaborating. So the production trees would do better when the other trees were there and they were collaborating underground through mycelial threads. That is literally where they got the term mother tree. If you see that movie Avatar, where Sigourney Weaver dies and she taps into that mother tree, they called it the Wood Wide Web. She turned the industry on its head because she got past the prevailing perspective of all the insiders. So when you come into an industry as an outsider, as a woman, understand that your value is higher than the regular same old perspective. You bring that new perspective as that one in a million people who's coming in. And so the reason you can come into this field and feel really good about it is because you could change the whole world with a new perspective and with the new ways of seeing science. So please, women, join us. We need you.
A good female scientist will be Temple Grandin. She's an animal scientist who came up with a lot of things that involve animal behavior. And she's also autistic. And learning about her story, she's a woman, she's autistic, she's a professor, I think, somewhere, I forgot what school in the South, at one of the agriculture schools. But that gives you an idea that nothing can keep you back in STEM. Well, she grew up in the 40s or something like that. She has a learning disability. She has a whole bunch of things, and she's a woman against her. And she's able to overcome those things. And people seek her out just to give talks. She revolutionized the animal industry just based on animal behavior. So there's so many women that are either not spoken about, or they're spoken about, but you only hear them in certain niches. And when you find these people, it gives you hope and it encourages you to do or accomplish those tasks, because they didn't let those things hinder them to achieve that goal.
Azure, I've heard Dr. Grandin speak, and she's absolutely amazing. She is.
What does your field offer that other fields can't?
I think, I'll start with the field of pre-hospital emergency medicine offers a lot of independence. And you work with a partner, but basically you have a set of protocols, but you make your own decisions for the most part, working on the street under pressure, I might add. And it's a sense of freedom, being out there through all sorts of weather, day or night, and being in the middle of something that would normally just be sitting at home watching on the news, like snowstorm or other natural disasters. So I think for me, that was an interesting thing, to be out there and be independent, make my own decisions, and just working under a lot of unexpected conditions, I guess. Floods, hurricanes, blizzards, heat, cold, walking into buildings, climbing under subways and, wherever the call brings you. So it's exciting. Sometimes it can be boring, but those are the good times when you have to sort of store up your energy, do a little studying, kick back a little bit, try to finish a whole cup of coffee within 8 hours if you can, and just wait for the next call, next challenge. It's very challenging. And for women, I think especially, I would love to have this field and all fields in STEM, get to the point where we don't have to have any qualifiers before the term, like female scientist, Black paramedic, female paramedic, et cetera. So it's just, so no one has to assume that because it's a paramedic, it's a male, or if it's a physician, it's a male, or a scientist, it's a male. So I think it would be nice to have, but we're not there yet. So we have to still encourage people. And it's good too for, I think one of the things I enjoyed about being a female in this field is you're better representing the population that you serve. We don't just treat males. We don't just treat middle class. So we really do need diversity in the pre-hospital setting. Not that we don't treat everyone the same, but I think it's, for example, taking females, there were calls that I would walk into where a woman was preferred, whether it's because of cultural reasons or calls. So I enjoyed that part of the job as well, but I think the challenge is ongoing out there. So that's probably the best part of the job and the most difficult.
I will just say that as an ecologist, what I enjoy most is the adventure. I get to travel. I get to spend grant money to go do crazy things in the jungles of Borneo, or in the jungles of Singapore, or on the beaches of Brooklyn, or in the parks of the Bronx. And I can really pick and choose what I do. I'm sort of the master of my academic expertise. I love the flexibility of academia. Teaching is something where I also have a lot of autonomy in the classroom, in the lab. Whether I want to teach in the summer or in the winter, it's up to me. I am able to make a lot of decisions, what I teach, how I teach. And publication, as a scientist, when you publish, you're in the literature forever. So you're kind of, you're leaving your mark on the world. in a tangible way. And each of my publications is one of my babies, and they will go on and make the world a better place. So that's really fun and exciting. And it's a little bit of an ego boost. And, speaking frankly, we get paid very well. I have great benefits. I have a lot of time off, and it's really easy to find a work-life balance if I wanted that. Now, since I like working, it's not so difficult, but it is something where flexibility and autonomy are really, really prevalent in academia.
I could talk about being a chemist. It's really a foundation course where you can go in different avenues. So a lot of students have gone into working in industry, government, forensic chemist, environmental. So it's really a great field where you can, I have other students who are editors for textbooks. So it's just different avenues you can use as a chemistry major. So it's a great field.
So as I mentioned before, as a nurse, you can do so much. You can do so many things, and I think there is no limitation. Your only limitation is, what are you most interested in? So if you enjoy being at the bedside, like Gail mentioned, if you enjoy being a flight nurse, to work with a flight paramedic, if you enjoy the ER, if you enjoy med surge, if you enjoy long-term care, whatever it is that you want to do, you have that opportunity. And then, of course, if you want to, I think one thing the pandemic has shown us is that there's so much we can do from home. Even as, I could literally sit in front of my computer and do triage all day. There's just the opportunity to, and I think since we're talking about women in STEM, what an amazing thing technology is, that we have this opportunity to be able to broadcast to each other or to students or to other people and speak to them using this medium. It's awesome. It's something that I think about when I was younger. One of my favorite shows was The Jetsons. And Nawal, you probably don't even know what The Jetsons is, but the Jetsons was the show basically about this future family. And some of what we're doing right now, this is so very much how technology has evolved and changed. And I think it's cool that we're, and that's, just to, bring it back to the fact that women in STEM, young girls in STEM who are interested in these kinds of things, to see all the cool things that they can do and all the, amazing, everybody up here has a different, perspective on science and technology, math. That's the, the world is their oyster, honestly. And for me as a nurse, I am still fairly young in my career as a nurse. I've worked in healthcare for a long time, but I just feel like there's so many other opportunities that I have. And I think that's the best part about going into any career. Just hearing about all of you ladies' backgrounds, you may have started here, but you're here, but all of it, it brings something to your chosen career now. And you're able to share that with your students and share that with others, being mentors and being role models. I think that's one of the best opportunities we have in whatever career field you choose. If someone is interested in that career field and they see women, this person is like me, this person is a female, this person is an African American, this person is of Native American, whatever the case is. When people see people like them, it helps people to understand, and it helps you to want to, what, I can do this too. I think the most appealing part about, the thing that makes me happiest about my job is to, when people come in and they see someone who does look like them. We are serving the populations that we look like, and they look like us. And I think that's important for people to see, because unfortunately, there's so many disparities in healthcare when it comes to minorities and then when it comes to people of other ethnicities. I think that it is important that they see people that look like them and, can relate to them. And I think that is, we can think of ourselves as ambassadors from that perspective.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. Something else that I really like about my job is the collaborations. Being an ecologist is a field where everybody's working towards a shared goal, and we all share and play nice together. And some science fields might not be like that, but if you pick the right one, everybody is a collaborator. And the technology that Heather mentioned has allowed me to collaborate with people halfway around the world who look nothing like me, but who have a shared interest and a shared agenda. And that is something that I really enjoy. I think that even in the community college world, sometimes you hear about academia being cutthroat and people competing for jobs. In the community college environment, it's the flip. It's the other opposite extreme where everybody works together, and the community college really is a magical place. And so it seems a little bit like, oh, we're, not quite at the 4-year level. I like it here better because I don't have to deal with conflict, and I can do my job and people work together. And that's wonderful.
I'll just talk about, not as an animal scientist, but just agriculture in general. I think agriculture is not really looked upon by most people as an option, but the majors range from, again, like me, animal science to nutritional science, forestry, ag engineer, entomology, viticulture, which I found out about at Texas A&M, where people learn about wineries and how to plan out a winery, how to select appropriate grapes for the environment, how to develop certain species of grapes to thrive in certain climates and environment. Agriculture, it's food. Everybody has to eat. Whether you're a vegetarian or you're omnivore, you have to eat. Not only that, you have to learn about the environment in which you live in to have other aspects of agriculture that people don't think about, such as they have a branch of agriculture that allows people to come onto land and watch migratory birds and observe them. And then you also have agriculture that look at how certain species of animals that are wild interact with the land that you're on, so you can kind of preserve their habitat and also utilize the land that you have for production purposes. So, and then I always tell students, especially students that are trying to figure out what they want to do as far as graduate life, there's more than one way to skin a cat. A mentor told me that, and that has worked. And I've given that advice to a lot of people. Let's say you want to go to medical school, your GPA is low. You might be able to find a master's program. You might be able to use that you will be able to use the master's program to get into medical school. And you will also have that experience of research to have on your resume that a lot of traditional medical students won't have. It might also give you an opportunity to learn more about a certain field and apply it somewhere else. Maybe you might say, I want to become a nurse. Well, it didn't work out. So you went on, you did a master's in biology or some aspects of biology, or you went, if you're in a 2-year school, you went and got a bachelor's in biology or something that would put you more closely associated with nursing. And you can apply for a nursing program, an advanced nursing program. It all leads back to the beginning with what all of us have said in a nutshell. Don't let one thing set you back. You fail a class, just don't let that deter you.
All right, I have one final question. What experience made you go into your field?
I was always told that you should be a veterinarian. My path in life I didn't start off as an animal science major, and clearly I'm not a veterinarian, but I started off as a computer science major because I'm good at math. So unlike what everybody's been complaining about math, that was not my thing. I literally took calculus to boost my GPA. I'm sorry to brag about that. And I was told that's not a GPA booster, that's a GPA killer. And I just looked at a male professor, was like, that's exactly what I did. But I was a computer science major, and I did not like computer anything. I didn't care too much for programming. I didn't understand how it related to math. I was told I might want to look into engineering. I didn't understand what engineering was and didn't seem like the appropriate thing. And when I got to Tuskegee, I immediately, after 2 months, dropped my computer science class and sat down and thought about what I needed to major in. And that was my first semester freshman year. I looked at chemistry. I saw that I had to take computer science. I looked at all the engineering courses. I had to take computer science. And then I did not want to be a biology teacher, and I didn't think I wanted to go to medical school. So animal science seemed like the choice. And I was very grateful for it because I took all the classes except for 3 classes that biology students would have taken. And the same thing applied for chemistry, because I took general, organic, biochem, pretty much everything that could have led me to a chemistry degree, with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 courses. The same thing with biology. But then you put all the animal science courses on top of that. So I was happy for the hands-on experience. You know, most of my friends who were in biology, they never ear tagged, they never gave shots or anything like that. And I was doing that my sophomore year. The thing that led me into reproduction was my poultry science class, where the professor said there was no way to store chicken semen. And I was like, but you can do that for cattle and goats and stuff. What you mean? And that was like, I want to do that. I want to be the first one to do that. So that's what led me on this path. And I'm very grateful for everything I've learned on the way, both related to my field and outside or closely associated with my field.
I think for me, going into pre-hospital care, a few things led me to that. I mean, the first thing was my upbringing. I was brought up in a somewhat untraditional household. My dad, right before my dad and mom got married, my dad got polio. So he had pretty severe physical limitations. So in our home, there were a lot of kids. And in our home, a lot of the typically male jobs were reversed. You know, I had to have my turn mowing the lawn. My dad would do maybe wash dishes while my mom maybe repaired something or did some outside work. So it was not even though I grew up in a time, you know, in the 60s and 70s, I grew up in a time where women weren't quite into, you know, there was still a lot of traditional female roles. I didn't see the world as that. So I was already preconditioned to accept a non-traditional or a male-dominated field. Then, you know, I had a boyfriend who was a medic in the Army back in the Vietnam days. And I told him I wanted to be an EMT. And he said, that's not for girls. And then working at my female-dominated cashier job at the supermarket, an ambulance pulled up, you know, to get coffee, and a female EMT walked out. And I actually asked her how I could become an EMT. And it was before paramedics were really on the scene. So that's, you know, again, just the entry level. And she was really sweet. She gave me a phone number, told me who to call, and I pursued it. So it was really seeing a female in the job and gave me confidence. And she, you know, she wished me luck. And then when I got to class, again, it was mostly men in the class, and it was mostly male instructors. There was one female instructor. And that gave me a lot of confidence too, like, wow, maybe I can do this. So I think for me, it was having that opportunity of a non-traditional upbringing where we were, as females, expected to do whatever jobs had to be done, whether they were physical or not. And even more so, seeing women in the field and having the confidence to use them as role models. It's a nice opportunity.
What led me to nursing in particular, as probably many of you, as Azure talked about, and I started off straight out of high school. In high school, I was in health occupations club. I was the president of the club. And so I knew I was going to go into some healthcare field. I actually come from a family of educators. Every single one of my mom, including my mom and her sisters, were educators. And so but that was not what I thought I wanted to do. So in the health occupations, you know, clubs, we competed in competitions. And so anything healthcare related, I was so, you know, into. And so went to University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill for my first undergrad degree. I was on a pre-med track. I took the MCAT once, and it traumatized me a little bit. But but as I started, just learning more about med school and learning more about some other things, and then I got a part-time job at an assisted living community. When I got that job, and I was just a part-time evening receptionist, what I found was that I want to be in healthcare, but I want to take care of people. I don't want to kind of drop in and diagnose and, move on. I wanted to actually hands-on, do some those things in terms of actually taking care of, individuals and taking care of patients. So I ended up in the assisted living community, worked my way up. When my assisted living career actually ended, I was an assisted living director. So one of the things they asked was, well, we would really love for you to become a nurse, because that helps, of course, with your assessment skills and that kind of thing. So I said, absolutely. That was what I wanted to do. I had realized at that point, it's really what I wanted to do. Unfortunately, there was no way I could do a director position and be in nursing school. So I demoted myself and just became a caregiver on the floor so that I could devote my time to nursing school. Once I received my nursing degree, I started working. I actually transitioned from a CNA to a nurse in the same hospital where I am now, and I haven't looked back. It's because, as we've all mentioned before, when you find that thing that you love and it's your passion, and you don't want to change. That's where you want to be. What appeals to me and what drives me is, as hard as the pandemic has been, as hard as, losing patients, as hard as sometimes, and there are things that have affected me so much through the pandemic. Before someone gets intubated, I was the last person they saw because I pushed the intubation meds, and they never came off the vent. They ended up passing away. So those are the things that keep you coming back, and it's because I want to continue to make a difference in the lives of those patients and their families. And that's my life goal, is to continue to be that person, continue to make that difference in whatever way I can.
I really agree with that sentiment, because my inspiration also came from a tremendous desire to make a difference. And if I had to do some psychoanalysis, I would say it's because I grew up without a father. So I really felt inadequate. And I really wanted to be on this planet and be here for good, to make a difference. As a kid growing up, my mother was a hippie. She wanted me to run away and join the circus because I wanted to travel. I wanted to work with animals. And I kind of had a thing about playing dress ups. So she thought I could be one of those ladies who rides on the elephants with the feathers in my hair. And I didn't have the words to explain that I wanted to merge my love of travel and nature and exploration into something that made that difference, that contributed and made the world a better place. As a little kid, I would fantasize about taking a bullet from the hunter to save the last tiger. I'm getting really deep here, but when I graduated, when I went into college, I knew exactly what I was there for. I again, only went to college to become a wildlife biologist, to become an ecologist. And when I graduated, I was given a book by a friend's mom, and it showed me the pathway forward. It was written by a man who was the world's leading expert on jaguars. And I said, I think I want to be like that. And I ended up becoming the world's leading expert on civets, which is not quite as big as a jaguar, but still pretty cool. I think all along the way, it was this internal desire, exactly what Heather said, to make a difference and to make the world a better place.
I agree what you were saying. I had a high school teacher, a chemistry teacher, and he always was inspiring me to, always think more and in research. In my junior year of high school, he asked if I wanted to do research to be part of the Intel Science Fair. And I wasn't too sure what that was. But he said, you could do research with a professor at Brooklyn College and it'll look great for college. So I said, okay. So I went into the lab every day with the other grad students, and, I was the little high school student, wasn't really sure what I was doing, but I was just modeling what the grad student taught me. And I just remember when I did my first PCR, and I was like, oh, this is so cool. And it was very interesting. And then I had to conduct my poster presentation at the end of the summer. And I was so inspired that I was able to present my findings to the other people in the program. And that really inspired me to get into that field. But then my mom, of course, first generation Caribbean parent, she was like, what are you going to do being like a scientist? Like, what kind of career is that? She really wanted me to focus on becoming a doctor and that type of field. So because of that, I was pre-med in college. But then when I got into organic chemistry, my professor really was asking me, do you really want to do research? And so again, I went back into the lab and did research and focused on that. And then after undergrad, I did research at LIU for about a year. And then I had my son. And so I had to decide if I wanted to continue research or being a mother, spending more time. So then I went into teaching. So I taught high school for a little bit and middle school. And I loved inspiring the students. But then I always felt I still needed more to help more students get into the field. And then now, as a STEM advisor, I feel I'm right where I am.
Thank you, ladies. Well, that's all that we have time for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you will tune in next time when peer mentor Bilal Ali will be discussing life after Kingsborough. If you'd like to speak with myself or any of the other peer mentors, contact the Health and STEM Academy at 718-368-4903 or email KCC STEM peer mentors@gmail.com.